a song for you.
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and today, guys, we have a really unique episode. This is the only one I can think of where this will happen. It's possible, I suppose, that there might be another one, but I don't think so. Because there's two things. One, we have recorded versions of two different singers singing this song, but we also have a version that was done for the album and a completely different recording that was done for the 45 release. So I don't know of any other songs that were specifically recorded for 45 that were different from the album. At least not that I've been made aware of so far. If I find something, obviously I'll let you know and cover them both. But yeah, I think this is the only one. So that being said, we're going to do the album track first, then we're going to do the 45 version, and then we're going to do the one with our second singer. With that one, I honestly have no idea where it comes from. I don't even remember how I stumbled across it in the first place. It might have been on YouTube, but I don't think so. But I can't find, like, it doesn't look like it got released or anything anywhere. So I don't know what it was all about. My guess is it might have been a BBC session that they recorded, but I don't see any reason they would have done the song the way they did it. We'll get to that when we get to that. But anyway, I can't say it's not a live track. And even though I'm not really covering anything live on this podcast, this is the only one that would really fit this category. So I think it's okay to include it. And I can't say I won't cover anything live. I just don't have any intention to at this point. But you never know. By the time I get to the end of this podcast, I may be like, you know what? I kind of want to do another season. Maybe let's do Made in Japan or Made in Europe or something like that. I can't say that won't happen, but as of today, as of my recording of this, which is January 31st, yeah, I don't have that intention. So this is going to be obviously a longer episode because we have three versions of the song to cover. So let's get right into it. The first version, the proper album version, is listed as Bird Has Flown. The 45 version is listed as This Bird Has Flown. Here's the album version. First, I got to talk about Nick Simper's bass line. I love that the last note goes up instead of down, because that would be the natural progression, I think, right? To just go da 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 da, and instead it does the opposite of that. And I really love ending on that tick up in pitch. Also, you know, I didn't realize, or I'm sure somewhere in my head I did, but never really sat down and thought about the fact that, you know, I've mentioned that this is really the last album that we get a lot of wah pedal from Richie, but I just didn't realize how much is on this. I mean, he's obviously playing it in the riff. Sounds great, but it's just like, wow, so much of this shapes this album, and then he just takes it away. Just gone after this. Also, cool beat from Ian Pace. I like that he's not just doing, you know, a bass and snare combination like you would have in a typical song. He's really making it a little bit moodier, which I like. I think it just gives a whole different flavor to the song than it would have if it was like boom, boom, tap, boom, boom, tap. I love just this playing on the toms. Really gives it a dimension that, again, it's just like one of those Deep Purple things that I don't know if another band would have thought of to do it this way.
On the beggar, on his cornerstone, catches pity in his wrinkled hand. But the robber, whose bird has flown, catches nothing, only grains of sand.
I have no idea what this song is about. To some extent, I have thoughts on parts of it, but overall, like, I really don't know what the song is about. But I also don't care because I love the vocal pattern. I love the way Rod sounds on this, especially his voice in combination with the guitar and bass is just like a dream listening to this. It's so well blended. The great mix on this, by the way. And again, this is the 2000 remaster, so there may be some differences between the 2000 remaster and the original release. I would expect so. Otherwise, why would you remaster it if you weren't going to do some kind of sound enhancing work? But no, I love the blend of it. I've always thought the mix was really good on this song. And whatever Rod's singing about, I'm enjoying listening to the words coming out of him.
All the children in the distant house, they have feelings only children know. But the lover whose bird is flown catches nothing, only flakes of snow.
I really like what Richie's playing through that part too. It's just like he takes the basic and just finds a way to twist it. And that, I think, is one of the things that really sums up Richie's playing is he just doesn't play the typical straightforward stuff that you would expect. I mean, sometimes on his rhythms he does, but it's like he's like, okay, here's what it would be. Now what can I do to mess with it and make it more interesting? I just feel like that's a common thing for his style. And this is a great example of it. I mean, if you listen to what he's playing, those little just off-time notes he's throwing in really enhance the song and take it to a whole nother level.
Hey. The sensation is not new to you. It's something we all have known. You get it, it goes right through you. Yes, it's something we all have known. And the bird is flown to a place on its own, somewhere all alone. Hi.
So Rod returns almost to the style he was singing La Leña with. And I really like that. I like the volume swells that Richie's doing in the background. That's really interesting. That's, again, similar to what he was doing on La Leña at the end. Also, the one that's keeping this train rolling, though, Ian Paice is just playing some really interesting and intricate stuff here to, especially even in the slow part, just those fills that he's putting in, make you feel like the song hasn't slowed down, even though it has slowed down a little bit. And then just those dun, 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 those hard notes. Also, again, kind of like Blind, give you that feeling that the song is slowing down, but it really doesn't. Also, I had to double count it because I thought that part might be in 7/8, but it's actually in 4/4. So there you have it for those of you who were counting along. Well, if you were counting along, I guess you'd know that already. Those little words that Rod's throwing in going into this part, whether it's hey or sensation, like those are the reasons that I was never destined to be a good singer. I had a pretty decent voice and some good range, but I never felt relaxed enough or comfortable enough to do anything besides just sing the words on the page. And I love that about Rod. He just feels so comfortable singing and just, this is what I'm feeling. This has got to come out and I'm going to put it in the song. I've always loved that. Of course, I don't know, what other things might have been done and edited out, but for the stuff that we get in the final product, I love that. It's human. It shows how music is alive. And so I greatly appreciate that. Also, just the overall tone of the song, again, it's a little bit darker because it doesn't have that snare, where you would expect it. So it just feels like it's a little bit darker and moodier. But it just goes to show what one simple choice can do to shape the feeling and mood of a song.
The The sensation is not new to you. It's something we all have known. You get it, it goes right through you. Yes, it's something we all have known. And the bird it is flown. Father Hermit in his lonely cave has a cell to keep.
Is it just me, or is Ian Pace hitting that snare a little harder coming out of that last section? It feels like it's more defined than it was in the other verses, and that gives the song a slight shift in feeling. I like it, but I feel now it's kind of on the attack. Yeah, he's definitely hitting it harder, and he's hitting it more often in this section as well. So the song is really shifting. It's kind of a way to do a build without having to do layers or a tempo increase or anything like that. You know, we've heard a lot of these builds that Richie and John do together, some with Nick involved as well, and they just kind of have these wonderful swells up to a change, or swells up to a decline, which is also cool. But here, it's just like by hitting the snare a little bit more often and a little harder, Ian Pace is now driving us towards that change that obviously we're about to head into a solo now, but that's been the buildup, is really that snare drum.
Yes, he's got him slowly.
I've always loved that solo. I think that is just fantastic. I feel like Richie at this point is so comfortable within this band. You know, I mean, being that he was a very sought after session player prior to Deep Purple and already known as a virtuoso guitarist, obviously he had made his mark. He had his way that he portrayed music. But when it came to Deep Purple, you know, there's a lot of, I feel, struggle in the beginning to try and figure out what they want to be, how they're going to achieve it, how they're going to be similar to Vanilla Fudge or inspired by Vanilla Fudge, but at the same time, carve out their own sound. God, Vanilla Fudge sounds really good right now. But I think Richie is now, and it's so interesting that it's so close to the end of this mark because we're on the last album. But I find it great that he's found his spot. I think this is really paving the way for him to just go all out for In Rock. Because if he was still feeling uncomfortable and, you know, maybe trying to feel out what he wanted the band to be, I don't know that they would have been ready to take on a project like In Rock, or, you know, how it would have turned out. If you're going to do an album like that, that's just literally hard driving, everything has to be exciting or dramatic, as he said, you've got to be in a position to feel like you can pull that off. You know, they were pretty crazy on stage though. So I have a feeling that a lot of this comes from just his playing on stage with the band and just how ferocious they were. That's probably the most likely, because typically an album is shaped by the things that you learn and experience on a tour, plus, you know, whatever your newer influences between the last album and this album, plus the combination of your previous influences, like everything that you pick up along the way. I remember seeing a demo for a video game years ago, and I think it was called We Love Katamari. And I've never played it, but it was it's like this ball that you roll around and it just sucks up everything around it and gets bigger. And I don't know what the point of the game is. It looks really weird to me, but the concept of that is pretty much what I'm talking about when it comes to taking on a new project. you're soaking up everything that you're learning. You still have the original stuff, but you're growing, and then you take that into your next project, show, whatever it's going to be. And it just continues to grow and grow and grow as you go. I mean, obviously life is like that. The more we learn, we probably lose little bits of that though along the way, because there's things we forget, or, things that we don't remember correctly. But I definitely feel like this solo is just something that he just like walked in and said, here's what I feel. Bam, done. Next. And it may or may have not been that way. I don't have any documentation on the recording of this, but it just feels like a just complete, I feel confident, this is what I feel kind of solo. So well done. Now we're going to see what Jon Lord has to offer. That was just about a full minute of Jon Lord extravaganza right there. Again, loved every bit of it. The only thing I found a little bit weird, but I think actually really works for this version, and I'll be curious to hear what they did on the other version, if it includes the solo, because it may not. But I love that it's a little more reverbed out than Ritchie was, because it really feels like the song all of a sudden, like it had this high energy coming with Ritchie's solo. And then like all of a sudden it's like we've got a mood swing. We've got a different kind of solo. It's a little more reverbed out. It feels like Jon's a little further away from the record player or from the microphone than Ritchie was. It changes feelings again. And it's these simple techniques that can make such a difference in the overall feeling of a song. If Jon Lord had been panned all the way to the right, for example, it would feel completely different than where he's at. If they put more reverb on it and made it feel like he was 2 rooms away, would change the feel of the song again, especially because this is the only instrument we're getting right now. So in consideration of that, it's going to have a huge impact. Of course it does. But it's the simplest technique sometimes that makes the biggest difference. And I've always loved that contrast from Ritchie solo to Jon, not only in the feel of it, but the sound of it, the difference in distance between the listener and the performer. I can't say any more about that. I just love that. Now, granted, Jon Lord is playing a little bit quieter now, but listen to how loud the bass is versus the keyboard. I mean, again, it feels like Jon's way on the other side of a very large room. I love what Ian Pace is playing through this part. I mean, it starts out with some simple pings on the ride cymbal, very nice, very crisp, and just kind of creates a rhythm out of nowhere. It's not what Nick's playing. It's not what Jon or Ritchie's playing. It's something very unique to him. And then he comes in with these bass drum dynamics and very light ghost notes on the snare. We're just now starting to get to the part where he's actually snapping the stick on the snare head and giving that a little bit of a pronounced sound. All that has just been a simple percussive buildup to this point as the music is building up. Jon's getting a little bit louder. He's adding notes to the chord. Ritchie's coming in a little bit. Nick is staying right where he was at. and everything is just kind of building around him. Again, not a huge amount of reverb on this song, nothing really kind of, making me feel like the song has gone off into the ether. A little bit dry sounding. Again, I guess I'm just so used to the production on this album that I typically don't think about it a whole lot. I just know how it ends and go with that. But again, listening a little bit differently with a different focus and attention than I normally do, picking up on that. Love the difference in the snare sounds, even when Ian Paice was hitting it pretty hard. He's hitting in two different areas of the snare head, so it gives him a contrasting type sound. You're still getting the snap of the strings underneath on the bottom head, but he's hitting in two different spots in those parts, so you're getting different snare sounds. It's possible there was a second snare, but I mean, there could have been a second snare in the studio, but more likely it's just single snare, just very, very solid technique. Obviously, being a guy who's based in rudiments, he's very, very comfortable with the snare and the different areas of the surface and how it's going to change the sound. But I love that part. I also love that he's pounding the kick drum too, just boom, 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 boom through that last section as well. And that gives it that extra push that you may not hear as much as you feel it. It only kind of really cuts in at one point from an audio perspective, but you can feel the punch of that kick before you can hear it. And because of the way it's blended. But I've always loved that because it really does kind of drive that final ending and get you to that last climax of the song. Speaking of climax, I do think that there are some masturbation references in the song. I don't know if that's what the whole thing is about. I mean, maybe it is like the caveman, he's got himself to keep him company, so he's good. He doesn't need anybody. Yeah, I don't know. That's as close as I can come to a story, whatever it might be about. But it could be about something completely differently. However, it really does, like, the sensation is not new to you. It's something we all have known. You get it, it goes right through you. I mean, it fits. Whether it's actually what it's about or not, it certainly fits. But yeah, great ending. I just love that culmination of sounds and that whole buildup that really it starts from John's solo, because Richie's solo goes with the song, and then it kind of everything shifts right there, and it goes to John's solo, who's kind of resetting and starting over and setting a new tone for the song. And then from the end of his solo, which is about a minute, to the final minute of the song, which is that whole build from the time that Ian Paice starts in with those ride cymbals and just those gentle pings, and then builds up all the percussion from there. Really killer take of this track. I absolutely love it. Now, this version is 5 minutes and 36 seconds. So that's the album version. The 45 version that we're about to listen to is only 2 minutes and 54 seconds. Now, I have not listened to this in quite a while, so I'm going to be interested to hear it. I think off the top of my head, I don't remember what the differences are. I'm guessing they probably cut maybe one of the middle 8 parts out. I don't know. We're going to see. Let's just get into it instead of speculating about it, because what's the point of that? Here is the 45 version of The Bird Has Flown. I think I said This Bird Has Flown earlier, didn't I? Yeah, I probably did. I'm not going to correct that because that's what happened, but it's The Bird Has Flown, the 45 version.
Catches pity on his wrinkled hand, but the lover whose bird has flown catches nothing, only grains of sand.
Well, I hadn't thought about it before, but if this is a song about having an orgasm, catching pity in your wrinkled hand is certainly paints a picture. So a couple things, like right off the bat, I can tell that it's a rougher sound. It feels like it didn't get the treatment that the rest of the album did. Like they didn't EQ, obviously they didn't EQ it or mix it the same, but it just, I don't know, it just feels a little bit rougher. Like it could have used another mix pass and maybe some better mastering. But also, there's a cowbell. That's pretty cool. It has a little bit of an And the Address feeling because of that. It changes the feel of the song a little bit because we're not tom heavy as much. Like that cowbell is really taking the focus away from the toms. The drums are a little bit quieter overall, so we're not getting that, chest thumping effect that we are in the regular version. So yeah, it feels more, and I think it's a little bit faster too. So it feels more like just like they're like, hey, all right, let's record this real quick before we forget the idea, or so we can listen back to it and decide what we want to do with it, or so I can learn this part or whatever, and just said, hey, let's put that out. Now, as I'm slowly integrating my vinyl collection onto the Discogs website and learning which versions of things I ended up with, some were on purpose, some just happened by chance, but I do have 2 copies of the Tetragrammaton 45, the A side, of course, being Emeretta, which we'll be getting to very soon. But one of the copies is the typical, silver Tetragrammaton pressing. The other one is actually a white label promo copy, which is pretty cool. I think that's the only Tetragrammaton 45 I have a promo copy of, and probably used for radio stations would be my guess. I don't think it's a jukebox copy because that would probably just be the silver label. So yeah, most likely a radio station copy. Discogs doesn't often say, what the promo copies a lot of times were used for. So I would just assume that would be the case. But anyway, they're both in good shape. Don't know if there was an original jacket to it because both of the ones that I have I think one is just the blue Tetragrammaton one and the other one's just a generic white jacket. But some of them, like Hard Road, actually have like a picture sleeve for the 45. So I don't know if there was one for that or not. I have not seen one, but in any case, I love that I have 2 copies of that and that they're both in good shape. Very cool.
All the children in the distant house, they have feelings only children know. But the lover whose bird is flown catches nothing, only grace and snow.
Maybe it's just me or the mix, but I feel like the bass is heavier on this. Like it's a thicker tone, got a little bit more distortion and grit to it. Richie's guitar sounds pretty much the same, maybe a little bit thinner to me, but the sound is cutting through. Really not hearing what Jon Lord is doing on this part in this version. But, the mix, again, the mix is a little bit rough compared to the album version. Also, Rod, it feels like Rod might not have been solid on the lyrics. It feels like he's ending these a little bit staccato and not letting the tone of his voice carry out a little bit, except for the last line. I don't know, it just feels like this is a little bit rushed to me. But I want to be fair. If they recorded this version first, this might just have been the version, and this is the way that the song was going to go, and that was that. And then when they sat down to record the album, the producer brain of whoever, might have brought it up, whether it was the producer or somebody in the band or whatever, said, hey, you know what? Let's do this with it, or let's change it around a little bit, or let's take a look at this recording because I think we can make it better. Obviously, there is a difference between the two, although they're fairly similar so far.
The sensation is not new to you. It's something you all have known. You get it, it goes right through you. Yes, it's something we all have known. And the bird is flown.
Well, I don't know if you could hear it, but there were some interesting accents coming in from Jon Lord just above the mid-range on the keyboard that kind of following Rod, but adding a different tone because they were in a different octave. Pretty cool, I have to say. If he played that on the final, the album version, I'm not hearing that.
To a place on its own, somewhere all alone.
again, I feel like Richie thinks he's playing Lelania. That definitely felt like the ending of Lelania through that, and then carrying it all the way through. I don't know how well that fit. To me, it's kind of contrary to the music. So again, I'm not hearing that in the studio version. So I like the idea of it, but I don't think it quite works for me.
Oh, the hermit in his lonely cave has his sound to keep him company. But the lover whose bird has flown has his heartache just the same as me. Sensation. The sensation is not new to you. It's something you all have known. You get it, it goes right through you. Yes, it's something we all have known. And the bird has flown.
Boy, that part that John Lord's playing going along with Rod there is really growing on me. I actually really like that. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record, no pun intended, but I'm just not hearing that cut through in the original version. Again, that could be an issue due to the treatment that it received for the 2000 remaster. So I'll have to go back and listen to that on the album, the vinyl album that I have. I don't know. Yeah, I think that there's some cool things about this version. Obviously, so far it's been somewhat similar, but it does have a different vibe to it altogether. And I have to admit, it could be my bias that I'm just used to the album version, but I have to give the album version the nod because I think it's more put together. It's got more feeling to it. It sounds better. But this version it's kind of like, this is what I feel like I would have expected to see live if I had the album version and then went to see Deep Purple at a show tonight, if it's 1969. And this is probably what I would have expected to hear. A little bit more faster, a little bit grittier.
Oh, the hermit in his lonely cave has himself to keep him company. But the lover whose bird has flown has his heartache just the same as me. Just the same as me.
What really sucks is there's like 5 seconds of silence at the end of the file. And I'm like, I want to know where the song goes. Like, how did they end it? Where did it go from here? How much of a jam did it turn into? The ending's actually pretty cool. I like it. I like the original ending. Again, very accustomed to it, but there's definitely something cool about the way that this kind of just goes off. I really love that. Rod, who felt a little bit starchy at the beginning of it, really seems to be feeling the song here. Obviously, the sensation word was part of, just the song and not something he felt in the moment in the studio, but or he just liked the way that this one went and recorded the other one the same way. I don't know. I have no idea. But it was for him, obviously, part of the song because he did it on both versions. But this just kind of like going off at the end. That's really cool. I really like that. Yeah, again, prefer the album version. I would love to have heard a little bit more of this, but I like this version. I think it's pretty good, but it feels a little more rough. We don't get the solos. We don't get that whole change in feeling with John Lord just kind of taking over and spinning the song in a new direction. That whole build up with the percussion and pace. We get a little bit of it in this one, but not a whole lot. So I kind of feel like this one was recorded as a demo and the record company says, hey, we gotta get a 45 out. We need to release something. What do you have recorded? Let's use this. And they just sent it. And I feel like it probably happened in a slightly haphazard way because the mix is okay, but not great. Interesting that this would be released this way on a 45, especially, with Amaretta sounding as good as it does. So That's just my guess. Again, have no documentation or anything to explain any of this. All we're left with is the music and our question marks. So that being said, those are the two Rod Evans versions. Now there is, as I mentioned, a third version. This one, again, have no idea how I got it, where it came from. I honestly just don't remember. But let's hear what it would sound like if it was sung by Ian Gillan. Ian Gillan? Right out of the gate, this is just a killer, aggressive version of the song. Ian Pace already on fire, and we're only a few seconds in, like 18 seconds into the song. Love Richie's sound on this. It's a little bit raw, but I actually think it really works for the song. Also, we're getting a little bit of who I assume is Roger Glover playing on this as well. It doesn't sound like Nick Simper's bass tone, so I'm going to guess that Roger was on this version. Really, really good sound though overall. Getting a little bit of John Lord in the mix as well. But yeah, this version's got some kick to it. Yeah, I like this mix, I think, better than the 45 version. I'm definitely hearing a lot more reverb on Ian's voice than we were on Rod's. But the sound, it really, part of it, I mean, is the tempo, because it is a little faster, a little more aggressive. It makes it feel like the song is a little bit more alive. But I just think the mix is better too, because we're getting a little bit of everybody. I can hear more of what John Lord is doing during the verse. I can hear enough of Roger, I'm assuming is Roger, so I'm just going to refer to him as Roger through this, to hear what he's doing without it being so much in my face like it was with Nick Simper. Ian Pace just on fire. Richie seems like he's really excited to record this version. But what strikes me most is Ian Gillan just sounds so incredibly young all of a sudden. And I've heard some of his vocals with episode 6. He sounds very much like he does on In Rock, but maybe it's just he's singing in a little bit higher of a register than normal. But man, he just sounds like so young on this.
All the children in the distant house, they have feelings only children know. But the lover who is burning slow catches nothing, only flakes of snow. The sensation is not new to you. Yes, it's something we all have known. Yes, it's something that goes right through you. It's something we all have known. And the bird, it has flown to a place on its own, somewhere all alone.
So we're getting some of that Lelania guitar in there, and it's as many times as I've heard this, I've listened to this a number of times over the years, but it's fascinating to me how Ian Gillan and Roger are sounding with the Mark I sound, because I mean, this is Mark I sounding recording instrumentation wise, but with Ian and Roger on it. And it's just, we only get that in Hallelujah. Everything else going forward is Concerto, In Rock, and not going forward. Quick note on Concerto. Yes, that is a live album, but it is also the only recording of that writing from Deep Purple. So since they didn't actually do a studio recording, the live recording really substitutes for what would have been the studio album. So that's one I'm going to be covering as well. That's going to be a very short season, obviously. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear the roughness in the recording, especially there where we're hearing Ian scream. It's really just amazing to hear the recording techniques of Mark I with the Mark II lineup.
lonely cave, has yourself to keep you company. But the lover who has burned his flown, he has nothing to seem as you and me.
You know, I was thinking that maybe this was something that they just recorded as they were doing rehearsals to take this version of the band out on the road. But I mean, there's definitely some multi-tracking of the vocals in there. So that doesn't seem like something that they would have done. Maybe it was promo to introduce the new guys and show how they sound with the band. I mean, I really don't know, but either way, it's interesting that they recorded it. And I'm so glad they did, because this is really cool to listen to. Also love what John Lord's playing. He's doing that Hush style staccato cut off Hammond sound that really worked beautifully along the Mark I era from time to time. But yeah, this is such a grooving version. I should point out too, this version is 3:08, so it's a little bit longer than the 45 version, nowhere near as long as the album version. I know how it ends, but I won't spoil it in case you guys haven't heard this yet. We'll get there soon enough. It's going to be in this episode. Spoiler alert.
The sensation is not new to you. Yes, it's something we all have known. It's something that goes right through you. Yes, it's something we all have known. And the burden has flown.
Sweet baby Jesus, that was killer. Absolutely killer. Love that. We're getting a little bit too of what would become part of Hard Lovin' Man on the In Rock album right there. Really cool though. The jam kind of felt a lot like what would turn into Grab Splatter, which would turn into I'm Alone. And then that part from Richie obviously was part of what inspired one of his solo sections in Hard Lovin' Man. Really cool though. I love the different dynamic of it. I love the jam of it. That's kind of more like the 45 version, where the 45 version was going. And yeah, really cool. It was interesting to hear what Roger was playing, just, straight eighth notes, missing that one note on every pass at the end. Just dun, 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 dun. Really, really interesting version. Very energetic. Like I said, I'm really glad they recorded that and that it somehow found its way out into the world. I can only imagine the circumstances as I've done and thrown out some possibilities. But either way, we get what we get, and we got something really cool here. So, guys, this has been a long show, the longest show I've done as a solo show. Obviously, when I have guests on, there's a lot to talk about. Really different when you're feeding back and forth with a different person. A lot of people say it's hard to host a show by yourself. And yeah, it can be. It can also be hard to host a show with other people because your focus is different. Even when I listen to the song, I notice that my focus is different when I'm working with a co-host versus, or I should say a guest versus just doing the show by myself. So it's a whole different dynamic. And usually those tend to go longer because somebody points something out, then you kind of think about it and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let me process that. There's more going on. And with the solo show, there's no one to feed me any of that. So I'm really just going with, here's what I'm getting out of this by myself and just talking to whoever the hell is listening. So I'll cut it off now, though. This has been a great episode. So much bird has flown, as it were, or the bird has flown. And hope you guys enjoyed exploring these different options for the song. They're all worth listening to as far as I'm concerned. I would still say that the album version remains my favorite, giving the possibility of the nostalgia factor, the first version I heard factor, the version I've known the longest factor, all those good things. But been a great show, guys. We'll be back for, well, I would imagine our next episode might be a little bit long too, because we're covering a longer song. And then we've got one more to wrap up the season. So we'll be moving on pretty soon, but we're not done with this one yet. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a great day. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode and thanks for listening.